So our first lesson this morning for Lessons and Carols is a retelling of Luke chapter 2. And I have to tell you, I was sorely tempted to choose this as a Christmas Eve reading this year. But that larger crowd doesn't know me as well. So I thought I'd save my most radical self for you all this morning. But imagine sharing this reading with the world. It's by Reverend Amy Petrie Shaw. And it came to pass in those days that Central American countries were in turmoil, and word went out that people were going to flee to the United States. And this flight was first made when Trump was the President of the United States of America. And many people fled the violence, some alone and some with their families. And Joseph also went up from Tegucigalpa in the Central District within the department of Francisco Morazan in Honduras, because his house had been bombed, to seek asylum with Maria, his pregnant girlfriend. And so it was that while they were traveling there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son on the ground, and wrapped him in her own shirt, and held him to her heart, because there was no safe room to lay him anywhere. And there were in the United States shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the heat of the desert a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, donated by Catholic Charities, lying in a cheap crib in a refugee center in McAllen, Texas. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. Our prayer this morning is by my colleague, Reverend Aaron Payson. Oh, beloved, can it be that another year has passed? Wasn't it just yesterday when we heard such familiar music, when these well-worn stories awakened us from our post-harvest slumber? Wasn't it only weeks ago when we last reminisced about seasons past, when life seemed easier, when this season was so full of snowy wonder and glorious wants? Didn't we converse then about how much there was still to do and how short the daylight hours had become? Wasn't it we who sat together then and sipped warm cider, or was it hot chocolate, and laughed as we shared again the memories of youth that gleam once again from our eyes? Or was it coffee and ruminations about a world gone mad? And hadn't we just made the promise that a year hence we'd be further along than we were, and far more accomplished in the doing? Those perpetually elusive resolutions that prove us kin in effort and siblings in spirit. Oh, beloved, can it be that we are here again? How incredible, how miraculous, how excellent. So let us then give thanks for this heartfelt return. You who have been so much a part of each other's lives, whose presence means fullness of joy and love, you who are such a gift. Let old stories be shared again with new insight, and new adventures add spice to the routines of our existence. Let life's milestones mark for us the forward path to possibilities yet imagined, and our trials and tribulations give us deeper appreciation for blessings bestowed. The world, with its deep challenges, is needful of this, of communities of memory and hope, of a people of courage, with love deep enough to speak truth to power, with humility rich enough to make us mindful of the privileges we have not earned, and with a conscience broad enough to demand those rights that ought to be accorded all people. Let the light we kindle spark the awakening that is ours to embody. For the truth we seek is the life we lead, and the love we share is essence of that peace for which we yearn. Amen. Blessed be.
A Cup of Christmas Tea by Tom Haig. The log was in the fireplace, all spiced and set to burn. At last, the early Christmas race was in the clubhouse turn. The cards were in the mail, all the gifts beneath the tree, and 30 days reprieve until Visa could catch up with me. Though smug satisfaction seemed the order of the day, something still was nagging me that would not go away. A week before, I got a letter from my old great-aunt. It read, "Of course, I'll understand completely if you can't. But if you find you have some time, how wonderful if we could have a little chat and share a cup of Christmas tea." She had had a mild stroke that year which crippled her left side. Though housebound now, my folks had said it hadn't hurt her pride. They said she'd love to see you. What a nice thing it would be for you to go and maybe have a cup of Christmas tea. But boy, I didn't want to go. Oh, what a bitter pill to see an old relation and how far she's gone downhill. I remembered her as vigorous, as funny, and as bright. I remembered Christmas Eves when she regaled us half the night. I didn't want to risk all that. I didn't want the pain. I didn't need to be depressed. I didn't need the strain. And what about my brother? Why not him? She's his aunt too. I thought I had it justified, but then before I knew the reasons not to go, I so painstakingly had built, were crackling wide and crumbling in an acid rain of guilt. I put on boots and gloves and cap, shame stinging every pore, and armed with squeegee, sand, and map, I went out the front door. I drove in from the suburbs to the older part of town. The pastels of the newer homes gave way to gray and brown. I had that disembodied feeling as the car pulled up and stopped beside the wooden house that held the Christmas cup. How I got up to her door, I really couldn't tell. I watched my hand raise up and press the button of the bell. I waited, aided by my nervous rocking to and fro, and just as I was thinking I should turn around and go, I heard the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall, the triple beat of 2 feet, the clicking of, and a crutch came down the hall. The clicking of the door latch and the sliding of the bolt, and a little swollen struggle popped it open with a jolt. She stood there pale and tiny, looking fragile as an egg. I forced myself from staring at the brace that held her leg. And though her thick bifocals seemed to crack and spread her eyes, their milky and refracted depths lit up with young surprise. Come in," she laughed the words. She took me by the hand, and all my fears dissolved away as if by her command. We went inside, and then before I knew how to react, before my eyes and ears and nose Was Christmas past, alive, intact? The scent of candied oranges, of cinnamon and pine, the antique wooden soldiers in their military line, the porcelain nativity I've always loved so much, the Dresden and the crystal I've been told I mustn't touch. My spirit fairly bolted like a child out of class and danced among the ornaments of calico and glass. Like magic, I was 6 again, deep in a Christmas spell, seeped in the million memories that the girl inside me knew well. And here, among old Christmas cards so lovingly displayed, a special place of honor for the ones we kids had made. And there, besides her rocking chair, the center of it all, my great aunt stood and said, how nice it was I'd come to call. I sat and rattled on about the weather and the flu. She listened very patiently, then smiled and said, what's new? Thoughts and words began to flow. I started making sense. I lost the phony breeziness I use when I get tense. She was still passionately interested in everything I did. She was positive, encouraging, like when I was a kid. Simple generalities still sent her into fits. She demanded the specifics, the particulars, the bits. We talked about the limitations that she'd had to face. She spoke with utter candor and with humor and good grace. Then, defying the reality of crutch and straightened knee, on wings of hospitality, she flew to brew the tea. I sat alone with feelings that I hadn't felt in years. I looked around at Christmas through a thick, hot blur of tears, and the candles and the holly she's arranged on every shelf. The impossibly good cookies she still somehow baked herself. But these rich and tactile memories became quite pale and thin when measured by the Christmas my great aunt kept deep within. Her body halved and nearly spent, but my great aunt was whole. She saw a Christmas miracle, the triumph of the soul. The triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall, the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall. She poured 2 cups, she smiled, and then she handed one to me. And then we settled back and had a cup of Christmas tea.
Hello. The third lesson, Oscar and the Eight Blessings by Richard and Tanya Simon. Oscar's mother and father believed in the power of blessings. So did Oscar, until the night of broken glass. His parents put him on a ship to America. He had nothing but an address, a photo of a woman he didn't know. It's your Aunt Esther. And his father's last words to him, Oscar, even in the bad times, people can be good. You have to look for the blessings. Oscar arrived in New York on the 7th day of Hanukkah. It was also Christmas Eve. He knew his Aunt Esther would be lighting the menorah at sunset. To reach her, before the sun went down, Oscar had to walk over 100 blocks down the avenue of Broadway. And Broadway stretched out before him like a river. Oscar was tired, hungry, and cold. His father's last words to him felt very far away. But after a few blocks, he looked up to see a woman feeding pigeons. She offered him a piece of stale bread to feed them too. Oscar wanted to feed the birds, but he was so hungry that he swallowed the bread for himself. The woman reached inside her coat, gave him a small loaf of bread. It was warm and fresh. It gave him the strength to keep walking. He saw a newsstand full of comics. One showed a strong man in a cape doing amazing things. He stopped bullets, he stopped trains. The newsstand man held out his hand. Well, Oscar didn't have any money, so he gave him back the comic. The man called to him, "Keep it, kid. Merry Christmas." Oscar clutching his gift, his Superman, and he heard his father's words, "You have to look for the blessings." Oscar kept walking. He stopped when he heard music coming from a little alley where a big man was humming a jazzy tune. The man whistled to Oscar, and Oscar whistled back. They made a tune that was fast and light as the snowflakes falling around them. It was Oscar's first conversation in America. At the corner of a park, the boys were playing a snowball game, and one boy slipped. Oscar leapt and caught him, just like Superman would have done. The boy was laughing and made Oscar laugh too. But when he saw Oscar's cold hands, he stopped laughing. He took off his mittens, gave them to Oscar to put on, and Oscar felt the boy's warmth in his hands. He had something to give the boy too, the Superman comic. A few blocks later, a tall lady in a big coat walked out of a building. The policeman shouted, "Stand aside." Oscar stopped short. "Oh, Thomas, he's just a child," the lady said to the policeman. "Let him pass." And she winked at Oscar. The policeman moved from Oscar's path. "Yes, Mrs. Roosevelt." "Mrs. Roosevelt, wow." The sun was setting, and Oscar began to run. He had to get to Aunt Esther's before they lit the shamash. Running, he stumbled and fell. A hand reached out and pulled him up. "Back on your feet, son." His father was right. People can be good. He turned the corner and ran down the street looking for the house. He ran past a woman humming a nagundal. Suddenly, he heard a name, Benjamin. It wasn't his name. It was his father's name, and it washed over him. She had a dimpled smile like his. "That's Papa," he said. "I'm Oscar," whispered Aunt Esther. The end.
Covered some Christmas and some Hanukkah. Now our last lesson will be celebrating the solstice, which we also did the other night. Thank you for all of you who came to our beautiful ritual. Our fourth lesson is called Celebrating the Darkness by Erica Barron. Once upon a time, there lived people who loved the light. As soon as the sun rose every morning, they were up to welcome it, singing songs of celebration for the light. And when the sun went down each evening, they sang other songs, sad songs, songs of missing the light of the sun. They loved the light so very much. They did not love the darkness. Once darkness fell every night, they would hurry to bed since they could only bear the darkness when they were asleep. Even then, the total darkness was frightening to them, and so they always kept a fire burning in every room. The people's dearest wish was that the sun would not set in the evening, that darkness would never fall. But every day the sun set, and they sang their sad songs, and they endured the fearful, sad, strange darkness until they could greet the sun again each day. Now, in this land were born two remarkable children. They were twins. One was a girl, and she seemed to shine from within. Whenever she entered a room, everything seemed to get a little bit brighter. And the people loved her very much. The other was a boy, and he seemed to bring darkness with him. Whenever he entered a room, everything seemed a little dimmer. And the people did not like him. They feared him because he reminded them of the great darkness of the night. But although the people loved the girl and did not love the boy, the twins loved each other very much. And because the girl loved her brother so very much, the people mostly let him be, even though they were afraid of him. Now, as they grew, it became clear that these children were, in fact, magical children. The girl had the power to bring life back when it was harmed or lost. When she was a very small child, she could heal small cuts and bruises. When she grew a little older, she could heal broken bones and other large hurts. And by the time she was a teenager, she could make the crops grow faster and larger and fuller. The boy, on the other hand, had the power to calm and quiet anything. When he was a very small child, he could help his family to go to sleep more quickly, thus saving them from the fear of the darkness. When he was a little older, he could calm animals when they were frightened and make them still. And by the time he was a teenager, he could calm storms and winds and rains. He could bring anything to stillness. The people's love for the light and fear of the darkness only grew with time, perhaps more strongly with the twins always before them to remind them. And so one day they decided to ask the girl for a favor. They asked her to see if her magic could hold the sun in the sky and stop the night from coming. The girl was reluctant at first, but after many, many months of being asked, she finally decided to try, just to get the people to leave her alone. One day, just as the sun was at its highest point, she went out onto the top of the highest hill in the land, and she threw her arms up into the sky, and she asked the sun to stop, to stay right there at the top of the sky forever. And the sun stopped in the sky. The people were overjoyed. There was a big celebration. They sang all their songs celebrating the sun. They loved the girl even more. At least at first. For the first week or so, it was hard to tell now that there was no darkness to mark the days. Everyone was happy and content, but soon they began to get tired. Although they had always slept with a fire to ward off the darkness, sleeping in the full light of the sun was another thing altogether. They tossed and turned and woke up constantly. Some of them remembered that the boy could help with sleep, and they asked for his help, but his power of bringing sleep seemed to have disappeared along with the darkness. After about a month, the exhausted, frustrated people began to see that this constant sunlight was a problem. Though they still loved the light, they began to wish that the sun would once again move in the sky. And given the people's love of the light and fear of the darkness, everyone was afraid at first to say anything about this growing longing for nighttime. But as they began to confide in each other, they soon discovered that everyone felt this way. And they finally decided that something must be done. So they went back to the girl and asked her to get the sun to move again. It was her magic that had stopped it, and they figured her magic could make it move again. So she went back up onto the top of the highest hill, threw her arms up into the sky, and asked the sun to move. But nothing happened. She tried again, and a third time, but the sun stayed still. Sadly, she turned to the people and told them there was nothing she could do. There was a long moment of growing panic before the boy stepped forward. "Let me try," he said softly. Everyone thought about it for a moment and then decided this was a good idea. So he took his sister's place on the top of the highest hill. He threw his arms up to the sky and asked the sun to move. And the sun began moving all at once, rushing toward the western horizon. Within 10 minutes it had set, and within 15 it was full dark night. The people were caught off guard. They had all come out to the hill to see if the girl's magic would work. They had no fires lit. They hadn't needed them in weeks. They had nothing with them to light their way. They had never been outside at night before, and they were scared. At first they tried rushing home to get away from the darkness, but they soon discovered that rushing when you can't see where you are going is a very bad idea. They slowed down, but still peered at the ground, trying to get home as soon as they could. But then one of them looked up. "Oh," she exclaimed, "look!" everyone looked up, and then they all saw stars for the first time. They had never been outside at night before, and they had no idea of the incredible beauty of a sky full of stars. They all stopped hurrying toward their homes and stood and stared in wonder. And then they realized how very tired they were. And so slowly now, with more reverence, they started home again. And they all slept for a very long time. The people rested and were glad and appreciated the darkness for the first time in their lives. Eventually, the sun rose again. As it did, the people got out of their beds and sang their songs to celebrate the coming of the light. But at the end of the day, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they did not feel like singing their sad songs. Instead, one of the musicians began singing a new song, a slow, quiet song of thanksgiving for the night. And soon the others joined in, and it became their new sunset song. And the boy and girl grew up to be a man and a woman, and both of them were now much beloved by the people. Looking at them, still the best of friends as well as siblings, the people remembered that light and darkness are best in balance. The end.